Look, there's a storm. Where? Over there. Cool, let's go get it. Got it. As storm season intensifies, terrifying phenomena never seen before are unleashed. Two storm chasers and their competing teams find themselves squarely in the paths of multiple storm systems converging over central Oklahoma in the fight of their lives. So, while this is a spiritual sequel to 1996's Twister, Twisters is pretty much the same story, with a new cast and some updated ideas and excitement. As not to make it sound like a negative or even a detractor from this film. We've got Glen Powell, who seems to be everywhere on screen lately. Then Daisy Edgar-Jones, Anthony Ramos, Brandon Perea, Sasha Lane, Maura Tierney, Katy O'Brian, Tunde Adebimpe, Hadden-Paton, and David Corenswet. Now, these make up the dueling tornado-chasing teams, much like Helen Hunt, Bill Paxton, and Cary Elwes did in the original. Now, this film gives us a ton of heart, but not all at once. The opening sequence, it is filled with crazy excitement and action, instantly raising heart rates to solidify our attention for what else is to come. Now, I love how Edgar-Jones as the character Kate, she has a very personal story attached to storms. And unlike Hunt's character in the first movie, this life moment rings more of a personal nature, and we get to see that guilt and remorse play out throughout the storyline. Now, Edgar-Jones attempts to give Kate a harder edge, someone who's detached herself from emotions and the past just in order to function. But the actress, she has such soft and mournful eyes, it's difficult to truly believe that she has shrunken her heart like the Grinch and then cast off any feelings or soul. I mean, I was still drawn to her character, and then I rooted for her the entire way through. I'm just not fully sure that I buy the cold and distant attitude. And someone who's not even attempting to be anything less than absolutely charming is Glen Powell playing Tyler. Now, his signature nice guy smile, it's in full effect, accentuated by this slight southern drawl that somehow doesn't come across as smarmy, but instead feels genuine. I mean, he's still suffering from an overabundance of hubris, but just in the same way that Edgar-Jones can't make herself devoid of sentiments, Powell can't really make himself despicable or slimy, even though his character does hedge on that. Now, this has a threat of turning into more of a romance in spots, especially thanks to just the instant chemistry that we see between Kate and Tyler. Now, there are sparks and flirts, and we know immediately that they click, but thankfully, the story sits with that emotion and the sexual tension throughout the story, instead funneling the desire into the shared goal of chasing the tornadoes. Now, Anthony Ramos is another standout in this. While he doesn't have as much screen time as the other two, he's still very pivotal to the plot and the character arcs. And I liked his dynamic with both Edgar-Jones and Powell. There's this odd mix of camaraderie and aggression, and that conflict, it works in both instances. But with the plot itself, there is a small additional storyline that feels shoehorned in, and just way too obvious. I mean, it's almost as if the narrative needed to create an artificial area of tension so that certain character interactions could play out and make sense. But this avenue they go down, it isn't fully fleshed out, and then it sort of seems forgotten in chunks. I mean, ending up just way more in the peripheral background so that it becomes an ineffective afterthought. Now, it didn't ruin the enjoyment, but I do think that there was a better way to establish and bring about the character conflict, especially because tension, it already existed in a believable and tangible way. Now, the pacing of this, it's going to feel somewhat like a roller coaster. It ebbs and flows depending on what type of sequence we're seeing. When the action is taking place, it's all-out mayhem filled with loud music, torrents of debris just flying at breakneck speeds, and then unbelievable peril at every turn. But when the action takes a dip, so does the momentum. I mean, this isn't necessarily a bad thing because it allows for the quieter character moments that provide development, and then also they endear them to us because we get to see them without all this adrenaline hyping up the situations. So with those highs and the lows of the energy, you might feel the time slightly. Now, I didn't mind because I was becoming more and more invested in the characters, but I can see how it could make you do a small time check at some point. But what's going to keep you from looking at your watch is the crazy exciting action. I mean, it's exactly why we go to a summer action flick like this. The destructive force of the tornadoes, it is intense and devastating. And just about every time, the graphics, they looked enveloping and believable. Now, in some instances, the camera puts us right into the storm, which I thought was awesome, except for the fact that we lose a ton of perspective and scale. Now, I love the energy and momentum of excitement that these sequences provide, but I think it's way more impressive and awe-inspiring when we get to see the magnitude of the destructive force just ripping through fields and towns. I mean, when we can see the tornado touching the ground and also see it reaching up beyond the clouds, that is a terrifyingly powerful sight. You don't get that same feel or even connection when placed into this just swirling mass of gray. But with that said, as was shown in the trailer, there are some spectacular effects that use the environment to just triple down on the dangerous excitement. There's one scene where this storm rips through some refinery or something. You saw it in the trailer. I mean, we get to watch this fire tornado. Now, it's great, but it especially works because of all the other story elements that are taking place at the same time. I mean, yeah, it is fun to see this swirling fire funnel, but it's also more impactful and haunting thanks to what the characters are experiencing in the same moments. Now, with a large group of supporting characters, there's not much time to allot to each of them, so most, unfortunately, get only a couple of minutes of screen time, if that. Now, I love how each of them maximizes this to either add some humor or a ton of heart, despite having limited lines. And I think that's also what carries through this story so well, the heart of the characters and the soul of the tale. I mean, there are loud and brash moments meant to highlight bravado, but this masks the underlying tenderness of motives, and then when we get glimpses of these, that's when it becomes touching. It's just strengthening the core narrative so that the arcs work in tandem. Now, I had a lot of fun with this, and because the first film still stands up today, both in story and intensity, I'm not really sure this film needs to exist, but I am really happy that it does because it's tense, thrilling, and just filled with heart to keep you glued to the edge of your seat. So overall, Twisters feels very similar to its predecessor in storyline and execution, but with new ideas to showcase nail-biting suspense and breathtaking action. Edgar-Jones and Powell have spectacular chemistry, creating a believably playful antagonism that bubbles over with charm. While a minor storyline is unnecessary and ineffective, the main arc is filled with satisfying banter, toe-curling danger, and an intensity that might make you pee just a little. Not all of the imagery or shot choices are as engrossing as they should be, but when we are shown the scale of the phenomenal destructive force, it can take your breath away. Twisters is an awesome summer action movie, and it is a blast to watch on the largest screen you can. There's no sex or nudity, some profanity, and then a ton of destruction and violence. I give Twisters 4 out of 5 couches. Okay, so over the years, we've had all sorts of natural disaster movies. What's one of the cheesiest that you've ever seen? And you can't say Sharknado. All right, let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.